Coming up on Network Africa, Kenyan top electoral official Rosina Kombe resigns amid alleged political intimidation and threats to life. Plague outbreak in Madagascar kills 74 people. And 2 men wounded after a shooting at South Africa's Cape Town International Airport. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker. We begin in Kenya, where a senior member of Kenya's Electoral Commission has resigned and fled the country. Rosina Kombe says her life and that of her family is in danger as she has been receiving death threats. She cited the murder of the Electoral Commission's ICT manager, Chris Msando, who was killed a few days before the August poll, as an example of why she took the threat seriously. She also claims that the country cannot hold credible elections slated for next week, Thursday, because of the division within the commission. Speaking from New York after fleeing Kenya, she said the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, is under political siege and is unable to reach a general consensus. The IEBC responded with regret at the resignation of Mr. Kombe, stating that they will provide more details in due course. In the meantime, President Uhuru Kenyatta has urged his fellow citizens to pray for the nation ahead of the repeat poll, declaring Sunday, October the 22nd, a national day of prayer. The rerun was ordered by the Supreme Court after it nullified Kenyatta's re-election in August, following a petition by opposition leader Raila Odinga. Odinga withdrew his candidacy last week, saying the election board had not carried out reforms demanded by the opposition, including firing key officials he blames for irregularities in the August poll. Daily demonstrations by the opposition have continued to take place, demanding election reforms.
The first step, and one which I hereby call for, is an extended period of prayer and reconciliation this weekend. After consultation with religious leaders, I have reached this decision to call on all Kenyans to pray for their country in their mosques, temples, and churches, culminating in a national day of prayer on Sunday. Let us begin by thanking God for seeing us this far, by asking God or asking God's blessings for our nation. Let us rededicate our nation to Him. Let us ask Him to abide with us and to guide us, both in this period and in the time to come.
President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, staying with Kenya, a senior analyst for the International Crisis Group, an independent non-profit organization, has said that urgent measures are needed to resolve a contentious rerun of the presidential election to be held next week. Muriithi Mutiga's comments come after Rosina Kombe quit and fled the country. Mr. Mutiga expressed reservations about holding the rerun on October the 26th amid rising tensions and severe political divisions. He says one solution might be to go back to the Kenyan Supreme Court for advice on how to proceed.
But all the players keep all this within the framework of institutions and do not take the battle to extra legal means. So the commissioner expressed her view very strongly that you cannot have a credible election where half the country, more or less, does not want to participate, and where the candidate that was announced as the second candidate in the last election says he will not take part. What perhaps might be a way forward is for somebody to go to the Supreme Court, seek an authoritative advisory opinion on what should happen next. Can the election be pushed forward? Can you feasibly have an election next Thursday within such constrained timelines? And what generally should Kenyans expect in this very, very heated electoral process.
And for more about the Kenyan situation, joining us in the studio is Dr. Adetokunbo Pierce. He's a public affairs analyst. Welcome to Network Africa.
Thanks for having me.
So Kenya's top electoral official, Roselyn Akombe, she has fled. She talked about political intimidation and threats to her life. Is this a blow to the electoral body and the entire process?
I think it's a blow to the nation. I think it's a blow to the credibility of the electoral process. And that is where the problem is now. It's not so much the whole structure of so-called independent electoral commissions in Africa is a big farce because it's nothing independent about these so-called bodies.
So you're saying Africa, we've not been getting it right from time immemorial?
Well, look, the minute the president appoints the chairman of INEC or such electoral body, they have actually falsified the credibility of the institution. Because how can you be an independent referee when you are being paid by somebody, being appointed by somebody? So the president, unless and until the electoral commission become truly independent, there cannot be a full democracy. Elections cannot be free and fair.
Okay, some would argue that perhaps it's not only Africa that's suffering this. There's the example of the United States elections and the Russia allegation, which they're still working on. That is not
true. That is not true. Because in the U.S., there are other problems. You know, nobody is saying that the Electoral Commission has actually been infiltrated. And it cannot be infiltrated in the U.S. because it is not one body. You do not go to a federal government and put everything under the auspices of the federal government. In the United States, every state is an independent body, and it is not, the members are not appointed or elected by the governor.